So the next part I want to talk about is uh, what makes a casino have superior business economics and what makes a casino have poor business economics. Now, first, I want to start off with casino licenses, right? So, typically in a city, they will, based off of its population, they will issue a certain number of casino licenses, right? And why is that? Why are casinos regulated? Well, it's because if casinos aren't existent, what tends to happen is that it will incentivize illegal gambling operations that are underground, right? And when this happens, those illegal casino operations they don't pay taxes, right? And another thing is it's dangerous, right? So if you are enticed to go to this underground casino parlor, and let's say you place $100 bet, so you should be paid $100, right? But what if you don't get paid? Let's say you won a boatload that day, and the person who runs it is part of some gang, right? It's like, no, we're not going to pay you, right? So that can happen. Those type of things can happen, or you might get robbed. Let's say, for example. So we don't want to incentivize those type of activities. So what tends to happen is, cities, states, provinces will closely monitor and issue casino licenses to cater to their population. The larger the population, they might issue additional casino licenses. So, for example, in the Greater Vancouver area, let's say the city of Richmond, okay, there's one casino in Richmond, which is River Rock, right? And I think it's perfectly sufficient for our local population. Will there be a second casino in Richmond? I doubt it. I doubt it. And the reason why is because let's think about it. What net benefit does having an additional casino for, let's say, a population of 100,000? I'm not saying that's the population of Richmond. That's certainly not. Actually, far greater than that. But if I'm a citizen of a city, what net benefit do I get from having another casino? As the let's say the mayor of the city, right? You probably want, let's say, more restaurants, more sports facilities, more areas for office space. You might want more areas for retail space, for example, because that would actually provide a product or service that fulfills the need of a resident of that city, right? But casinos gambling, it's a degenerate activity. It doesn't really create much net benefit except for the jobs that are existent within those casinos. So for the most part, cities will want to monitor and issue licenses. They don't want to issue too many casino licenses because that could be bad. Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind is that, let's say the local population is 100,000, right? And then one casino grabs all of it. Obviously, that casino will be the most competitive, right? But the city might not issue a second license. And the reason why is because if you issue a second license, right? Let's say the revenue is split evenly amongst the second casino, right? But you have overlapping costs, right? You have to hire another set of workers. You have to compete on advertising. So you both have, you have variable costs to compete with each other. So what could end up happening is if you issue a second license, what could potentially happen is that the profitability actually goes down, right? So the profitability goes down, then you receive less in taxes, right? So cities and states have to watch very closely whether they should issue more casino licenses or not, based off the local market, based off the competition, based off of how much they expect to earn from casino revenues. That's where the competitive mode is. I would prefer a casino that is the only game in town. That's far better than a casino that's in a location that has lots of competition. That's the first thing, right? And why is that? Well, if you're the only game in town, you don't have to compete on advertising, so that's lower cost, right? First of all, and number two, you get to set the odds, right? There's no other competing casino, so you can have whatever house edge you want. Right? Obviously, you don't want to make people lose. Like, you can't set a ridiculously high house edge, or if people just keep losing, they're not gonna come back because it's too bad. But you want to set a house edge where their losses are not as noticeable. Pretty much that's how casinos make money, right? But because there's a competing casino, you can have above average house edge. So that's good. That's a good thing, right? Another thing we want to look for are where's the next closest casino, right? Because cities are side by side, for example, or states are side by side, right? So, for example, in the Greater Vancouver area, in Richmond, there's a casino called River Rock. but there's another city called Burnaby. It's quite close by, right? So for me to go to Burnaby, go to mine, the casino in Burnaby is a 30-minute drive, right? Versus a 10-minute drive to my local casino, right? So a 20-minute difference, right? Now for Americans out there, my American friends out there, additional 20-minute drive doesn't sound like anything, right? But for spoiled people in Vancouver, any drive over 50 minutes seems to be very long, right? And so there's actually that level of competitive mode because people are lazy. They don't want to drive as far, right? So that provides a proximity advantage, right, for these casinos. Yes. And then what's another thing we look for in terms of business economics? A growing population, right? Because the more people that are in the city, the more potential customers that go into the casino. So we want a growing population, right? This can be for immigration, people forming families and having kids, or like a city becomes a hub for a certain industry. So, for example, IT. Let's say Amazon decides to open up office space in the city, right? And then IT professionals that get hired by Amazon, they travel to the city to work, and that has really good effects, right? So they IT professionals on average earn more than the average person, right? Usually six figures, right? So not only does the population increase, but also the average income of the population increases because they increase the average, right? So that's the third factor: growth in average annual income, right? And that's good for the casino. Why? As well, because as I said, the wealth effect, right? So if people are earning more, they have a higher propensity to bet larger, right? So the IT professionals that go into the city, they're going to increase their bet size typically would be higher than someone who's low income or earning um, just above it, for example.